Welcome one, welcome all. This is Lions Central Radio. I am Nick Castora, my co-host, Brandon Alyssaglu, and once more we're joined on the podcast by Jeff Risdon. Always glad to have him along. We had some summer doldrums, some stuff, but we're back to football now. Training camp starting as of today. Well, players are arriving today, I believe was the report, Brandon. It's rookies, QBs, and selected veterans that arrived today for training camp as of Tuesday as we're recording. We'll get into that. We'll do a whole preview of training camp, position battles, players to watch, all kinds of stuff for you guys. So we'll hit that right after we toss to my co-host, Brandon.
Well, yeah, folks, Nick, good to hear from you again. And, folks, absolutely wonderful to have you guys along for the ride again. We've been seeing, like I said, explosive growth, and it's all thanks to you guys sharing the show, either in clicking through the Amazon banner at the bottom of lionscentralradio.com or even making donations on the Support Us link on that page. We really appreciate that. Jason Hagel or Hagel, I'm going to screw up the name. At least you know it's authentic. We really appreciate the couple pennies you threw in our pot this week. And, folks, we're going to keep coming with you each and every week. Nick, it is finally almost practice time. Mm-hmm. I'm guessing Jeff's not too upset. Jeff, welcome back and glad to hear you're doing well.
Thank you. Yes, it's a very exciting time. It's kind of a bummer because all these other teams are already going through stuff. I mean, the Vikings are in their third day of practice, and we have to wait, but it'll be worth it.
Jeff, come on now. The Lions did sign cornerback R.J. Stanford, so the news is breaking hard and heavy for Detroit.
Wow. Now that's, churning your sixth cornerback. Now that's something else right there.
Well, so he has 51 career tackles, 2 interceptions, 3 defended passes, and he spent the last 3 years with Miami. The only thing that, he had 138 snaps last year. He's not really anything, or hopefully he doesn't factor into the race if you're Detroit. But is this an indication of Nevin Lawson's health, do you think, Jeff?
It very well could be, and that's a little bit concerning. I know the last time I was on, I waxed poetically about Quandre Diggs taking over in the slot, but you need to have 2 guys there. And all the guys that got drafted, Green and Greenwood and Bentley are all gone. So there is a need for depth. There's a need for guys who have some experience playing special teams, which Stanford does. So, you can give him a shot, see what he's got in camp. It's one of those low-risk things. He's not a guy that's going to play a lot of reps. I don't think he'd get even 100 snaps in Detroit. He's not going to be in the top 4. But if Lawson is out, they do have to push people up the depth chart. You got to keep adding guys to see what you got. They didn't really get. Actually, I'm a little more worried that it says something about Alex Carter than anything, because he's a guy that should be taking those reps, and he's not getting. That's a little bit concerning because he's a guy that's going to have to contribute as a rookie, unfortunately.
Yeah, he's a name we've gone over a little bit just because we haven't heard any news from players or team sources or anything about Alex Carter, whereas Quandre Diggs has been getting nothing but praise even just ahead of training camp. So cornerback, nickelback in particular, one position battle we'll definitely be watching throughout training camp, and we'll get into that more here in a little bit. One more bit of news for you folks. I guess this is more rumor than fact, but there's talks of a really lucrative extension looming for DeAndre Levy, and Brandon and I have both talked pretty extensively about our love for DeAndre Levy and how underrated he is as a linebacker. But, Jeff, what do you think of an extension for Levy? Is it the right move for Detroit at this time?
It absolutely is, and this is the best time to get it done. You get all your headaches out of the way. We saw what happened when you let it go too far with Mr. Scoop. He's not here anymore. Levy is arguably as valuable to the defense as Sue was. That's not going to be a popular take, but I happen to think it's true. If you let him go out the door, you're really having some trouble. You got to reward the guys who are delivering for you. This is a homegrown guy. He's gotten progressively better every year. He's one of the best at his position in the entire league. He does so many things. The defense would be a lot worse off without him. So, yeah, now it's time to lock him up. You're getting him. If he has another All-Pro year, his price tag's only going to go up, and he's probably only going to get better. So, this is the time to do it.
Well, and plus, and I know he was selected before character became such a major issue in the Lions' evaluations of players going into the draft. But you're also not running into a situation, at least I don't know DeAndre Levy personally, but I've never read anything along the lines of a junior guy head case there. That is absolutely insane that you would cut one of your one of your best defenders this close to the season and take a $17 million cap hit. That's something with Levy you're not going to have to worry about future behavior. I know people did talk about it a little bit with Sue, but I don't think anybody if you knew enough, you knew that Sue was never really going to be that detrimental, or at least not on that level. So you can't really see a downside with signing Levy the long term.
No, not at all. And he's a free spirit. If you follow him, what he does in his off season, he's a fascinating dude. And I like that. I like the concept that, this isn't a guy who's absorbed with football. When I lived in Houston, I got to see Arian Foster a lot, and how positive an influence being a free spirit was for him. And he's cut from the same cloth, and I really appreciate that. And I think the players appreciate that too. That this is a guy he's got his own thing going on.
Yeah, well, he's a guy, and just looking, we see these all the time. The off-season, you see rankings of players. That Bill Barnwell of Grantline did his top 100, and we just have a quick note on it, some of the lines that were in there. And DeAndre Levy's at 64, and there's other names we'll talk about here, Brandon. I'll toss to you, but just DeAndre Levy's a top 50 player in this league, and I don't get it. I don't get why people continue to underrate and undervalue him. I think he's one of the best linebackers in the game. And he makes reads, the way he can dissect the backfield, make plays, and get to a running back before he even should. I don't know how he still is a guy 64 or below. He hasn't made a Pro Bowl. How he's continues to be overlooked. That's my biggest takeaway from this, the Bill Barnwell 100. And go ahead and dive into it a little bit more, Brandon. But Levy should really be higher.
Yeah, you're not going to get much of an argument here. I guess I didn't pay attention to. I did read the whole thing. I was a little bored, and it's very long. But I can't remember anybody specifically in front of him where I thought it was. I wanted to call BS on it. Mm-hmm. There were a couple notes that I noticed, though. I mean, one of the first thing is, the sky hasn't fallen just because Sue has left town. There's still a lot of talent here. They talked about Darius Slay. He said he was very hard to keep off the list. It's kind of intriguing to see that they have this much talent, all you hear about. And I understand covering covering the whole league, very difficult to get anything drilled down with each team, get too granular. But there's a lot more talent on this team left than people realize. Was there anything that stuck out to you on this list, Jeff, or is it just another list to fill the time before we actually play football again?
That's generally the way I view all of those top 100 or top 50 or whatever. The one thing that I did note, Matthew Stafford was number 68.
Yeah, it was.
That seems a little optimistic. It's very strange, and I've been talking with people about this for a while now, how Detroit fans are so much more down and negative about Stafford than the national writers are. And again, you just mentioned that there's a disconnect sometimes. A lot of the national writers think that because the two names that they knew in Detroit, for the most part, were Reggie Bush and Ndamukong Suh, though both those guys are gone. They knew who Nick Fairley was. He's gone. They think that the sky has fallen. And when they don't realize that Glover Quinn is one of the best safeties in the league, Levy is arguably a top 5 linebacker. He's certainly a top 10 linebacker. Just because he doesn't blitz a lot, he doesn't get the glory statistics or anything. People still there's a lot here, like you said, and I think that the national writers are sleeping on that a little bit, and it's going to be fun when the Lions, who have a current win total, Vegas total of 8.5, when they go past that by Thanksgiving. It'll be fun to watch everybody scramble around and try to figure out, who are these guys? Why are they so good now? And that's my hope, anyways.
Well, to piggyback off that, I'm also hoping for that because I noticed a different number, that to win the NFC and also to win the Super Bowl are the same odds. So this particular site messed up a little bit, but it was plus 2,200. Well, what's $20 on Alliance win the NFC? You got to take a little shit. I could win $440. I figured those are a little ridiculous odds. I mean, they were pretty far back from behind teams like the 49ers or even the Giants. So
they're behind the 49ers?
I was just
behind the 49ers.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah, wow.
I mean, I guess odds makers know more than us, right? But that doesn't make a darn lick of sense.
We need to do an eat and tweet thing. If the 49ers wind up with more wins than the Lions, I got to eat something weird or something like that.
I'm with you. Yeah, I'll share the plate with you on that one. I don't get it.
We can definitely set that up, guys. I think we got a YouTube video in the making here. There's something else that I'm curious to see, Jeff, if you think this is as ridiculous as at least at first hits you, but then after you think about it, maybe it's not so outlandish. But Darius Slay said the Lions defense is right there with the Seahawks, and that the secondary, they are not the Legion of Boom. He was explicit to give them their due, but that they're kind of next. Absolutely crazy. I mean, I understand cornerbacks need confidence to play in this league, but does he have any basis for that discussion?
I mean, they're good, and right now Seattle's got a lot of questions. It sounds like Earl Thomas is going to miss perhaps the first few games of the year. Richard Sherman is coming off an injury. Their backup nickelback, who is going to be their nickelback, Jeremy Lane, is out for God knows how long after what he did in the Super Bowl with the gruesome injury. So, yeah, they're surrounding them. And they lost another one, too. They lost Byron Maxwell. So they're not the same Legion of Boom anymore. I'm not saying that the Lions play that kind of style, but if everybody, especially the four starters, if they play to their potential and stay healthy, they can be as good as what Seattle's secondary will be this year. Probably not what they were last year or the year before, but the potential is there. If Slay takes a step forward, Mathis continues to defy Father Time, and we can get somehow a career year out of Hedebo, because I think Glover Quinn is fantastic, and I think he's a perfect fit in this defense as the back-end guy. They can be a top 5 secondary. There's no question in my mind about that.
Yeah, and if you look at the numbers from last year, and it's, Brandon, you said, are they the kind of right behind or the next team up? I mean, if just from last year's numbers, they clearly are. Seattle was number 1 in yards per game allowed by a wide margin. They only gave up 267 a game. Detroit was second, though, with 300. Detroit was better against the run and slightly worse against the pass. So if it's a next man up behind Seattle, and like Jeff said, there's a ton of things that have changed for Seattle going into this season, but last year they were 1-2. There's definitely basis for what Slay is saying here, and it's, again, the secondary is going to be one of those things as we get into our training camp primer that's going to be one of the biggest position battles and overall groups to pay attention to.
Yeah, obviously I have no problem with this type of bravado. I think it's fine, especially because he also made sure to pay respect where it was due. So I always think these things are kind of positive in that respect. But there were a few things that came to mind as Jeff kind of talked about. I mean, Richard Sherman played in the Super Bowl with torn elbow ligaments. Earl Thomas played with a torn labrum. And I don't remember either getting burned or benched a la Hedebo. So it's kind of hard to put those two just because of how good those two are in comparison to everybody else. But yeah, I'd agree. Hedebo is definitely going to have to he's going to have to improve and get a little more consistent. And Rasheed Mathis is going to have to continue to play as well as he has, which, you know, all reports from so far this offseason, he looks just as spry as always. So who knows? It's not completely outlandish.
Yeah, so Jeff and Brandon, you just touched on this, but we haven't had you on in a little bit, and with the off season actually wrapping up now and heading into training camp, was this a successful off season for the Lions in your opinion? I know it's a broad question, but just your overall impression, is this an off season that they should be happy with going into training camp?
Yeah, I think they should have confidence in what they've done. We have to see what happens with some of the rookies and a guy like Tyron Walker. But I think by and large they've done a pretty darn good job. They filled some holes. They didn't overspend, which is a really big thing for me. They did not bust the budget and make stupid decisions out of panic or haste like you see a lot of other teams do. The Colts with Gosder Cherilus is a great example. He's back out there. He won't be back in Detroit from what I've been told. So. They didn't make any bonehead moves like that. And I think that's a real positive because a lot of their competitors have done things like that. So, yeah, they should feel pretty good about it. I think they have a very strong draft class. I think that they're going to have 3 or 4 of those guys be able to contribute right away. And that's a positive because that's what they needed. They still have some holes. We're probably going to get to a couple of those soon, I assume. But you know what? They're in as good a shape as I think you could be for a team that lost ostensibly its 2 starting defensive tackles and most noteworthy defensive players. I still think this is a very, very good team, and I think the arrow's pointing up for them.
Well, another thing to even point out, too, is the fact the way they handled the cap. I mean, there was a lot of dead money this year. I mean, almost $10 million just from Sue himself. But they still didn't do any kind of any stupid moves, and I don't just mean with free agents, but internally to try to free up cap space and mortgage things down the road. They did very well from that respect. And I guess in that context, it kind of raised my confidence in the whole front office as a whole. Did it do the same for you?
Yeah, I think so. And now I've never been as negative towards Mayhew especially, but also Lawan to some extent. He's made a lot of mistakes though, as a lot of people are. But yeah, and we'll see what they do with Levy. Let's see where that contract goes, because I do think it's going to be coming by the end of this week before he gets here. They can do the little, he's signing it right as he gets here, and it'll be a cool little PR thing, and Lawan will look good in his mismatched belt and shoes, and then that'll be wonderful. But yeah, it's a very you have to be positive about what's going on with this team. I know a lot of people don't like to hear that and don't want to believe it, but
you haven't seen my comment section.
If you look at the broader NFL and what's going on with some of their direct competitors in the NFC, the Lions have gone up. They certainly haven't fallen back. And you look at a lot of the other teams like Dallas, you look at the Giants, you look at the 49ers, the Cardinals are probably a little bit worse off than they were a year ago. You got to feel really good about what the Lions have done.
Well, and Jeff, that leads us right into through the next topic, which is if you're labeling the Lions and what group they kind of fit into, are they contenders for the division? Are they contenders for the NFC? Where do you kind of gauge Detroit and their relative strength heading into the season?
I think as long as Aaron Rodgers plays 16 games, the Packers are going to win the NFC North. Mm-hmm. But if he misses, even a quarter of a game, they're not going to win it. Wow. So, and I think the Lions are right there in the next tier. I think Seattle and Green Bay deserve to be the top tier, and I think the Lions are right there in that next tier with Dallas, who they beat kinda in the playoffs last year. I don't think Philadelphia has proven anything yet. I think San Francisco is a dumpster fire. I think Arizona has some questions at quarterback. Drew Stanton might be their quarterback. That's probably not a good thing for a playoff team. So there's a lot of questions going on. I think Minnesota is coming up, but I don't think they're quite there yet. They're a scary team though. Yeah. And there's always some wild card team out there. Carolina could be okay. I think New Orleans is going to bounce back pretty good, but none of those teams have proven as much as the Lions have, because guess what? The Lions were in the playoffs last year and brought just about everybody back. So I think they're absolutely in the top four in the NFC.
Well, I mean, I got to love that confidence, and I agree with you and pretty much the entire overall impression there. One thing I do want to say, though, is we got to come up with a stronger word, I think, than dumpster fire for the 49ers. I was thinking oil spill. I think that's a better description, because they're damaging a lot of things out there. And that's actually a perfect segue into the backup quarterback situation for Detroit. And we're kicking out the position battles here. Is this... I mean, it's Dan Orlovsky versus Kellen Moore. Yeah. I don't care who wins. What I want to know is how big of trouble is Detroit in if they have to turn to either of them? Yeah,
Brandon, this is something me and you have gone at length into, and just how bad. I mean, that if for any period of time they have to go to a backup, I think there's literally no hope. I guess, Jeff, the question is there any? Is there any way that they can? No, there's not. So I don't even know how to pose the question. But is there anything? Go ahead. Try and find a way to word this.
What is the max amount of time they could go with the backup quarterback? One play, one drive, one quarter, right, or one game?
I think if they're ahead in a game by like 2 touchdowns, Kellen Moore can drive the bus home and keep the win. Yeah, he's not going to make the critical mistake. Where they're going to get into trouble, and I do think Kellen Moore is going to win the backup job this year. I feel pretty strongly about that too, which is very, very bad for Dan Orlovsky, and should be read as such, as not more than that, and then an endorsement of Mr. Moore. He's not going to make the mistakes. He can't throw the ball deep, and teams are going to sit on it. If you remember how teams played Chad Pennington, they were bringing safeties up and weren't dropping them further than 20 yards down the field, and it snuffed everything out. They wanted him to throw over the top because they knew he couldn't do it. They know that's true with Kellen Moore. Now, maybe he's once again improved his arm strength. He really did improve it last year. Honest to God, he did. Yeah. It went from a middle school arm to a high school arm. If he can get up to a college arm, maybe we've got something where he could possibly mean, I looked at it this way, though. He's as good as Brian Hoyer, and Brian Hoyer is going to start for the Houston Texans, and the Houston Texans have a team that could go to the Super Bowl if they had anything at quarterback at all. And so it could be a lot worse. I mean, you could have Jimmy Clausen as your backup quarterback. You could have Brian Hoyer as your starter. You could have Ryan Mallett as your backup. That's what Houston has. You could have Geno Smith and whoever is there, battling it out like the Jets' job is. Ryan Fitzpatrick. It could be worse. It's not going to be pretty, but it could be worse. And I think that's the lenses that you have to look through.
Would Fitzpatrick would he be worse to you?
You know what? He would be, because he's a guy who can be really good at times, but then, God, he just
turns it over.
Boneheaded decisions. Because, he is a quality quarterback at times, but he just makes the worst decisions at the worst time. And I would rather not have any hope at all and be pleasantly surprised and have a little bit of hope and have your dreams shattered. That maybe that's just me, being from Cleveland and being a Lions fan for 40-some years.
What a combo!
That's the way I look at it.
Wow.
So I mean, that's just what it is at the quarterback position. We're not going to fluff anything up. There's just nothing to fluff up there. Like Jeff said, it's better to have no hope at all in the backups than to even think that there could be any. So we're not going to fill your guys' minds with any false hope. But at the running back position, there's plenty of room for hope, and that's a segue for you folks. We're kind of talking about Theo Riddick here, and just we've broken down both Joique Bell and Amir Abdullah, and we'll get into more of their role as we do the position battle stuff. But is there a role for Theo Riddick, either as a running back or maybe outside of the backfield? Is this a guy that had targets last season? He had just as many targets or as many catches as Joique Bell a year ago. I think he actually had more than Eric Ebron did. So he's someone that the offense used a year ago. Is there a role for him going into 2015?
I think so, and I think it's sort of the same role that he had at the end of the year. He's the 2-minute offense back, because he can play anywhere on the field, and that's very valuable in that sort of capacity. He's not going to get a lot of carries in your base offense. He's going to come in, like I said, in the hurry-up package. He might see time if they go to 5 wide receivers, he might come in and be a guy who motions back into the backfield just to tip off the coverage or whatever. I don't think you're going to see a great deal of him other than in that one specialized role. But that role gets used in just about every game. So he's going to get, I'm terrible at math, so I don't know whatever 16 times 4 is. I guess that's 64 or something. I wouldn't count on having more than 75 carries and maybe 50 catches. But all of those are going to be in times where the Lions absolutely needed it. It's going to be a crunch time. It's going to be at the end of a half. It's going to be, driving to catch back up in a game, and he's going to be in there because you can't put Amir Abdullah in the backfield when you have to pass protect. It just cannot happen. I can't stress that enough. He is so bad at it. And you really don't want Joique Bell in that capacity either. So there is room for him. I don't think you're going to see him a lot, other than that, because as a slot wide receiver, last year they had Golden Tate, and then Ryan Broyles was healthy and couldn't get on the field. I don't think you're going to see the third slot receiver get on there either.
Well, and that's actually Nick and I have kind of we've been talking about the same issues pretty much for the last 4 months now or so, Nick. So most people have heard that. Most people have heard our take on it, which is pretty similar. But you spoke about the wide receivers and the fact that Ryan Broyles couldn't get on the field last year. Now, obviously, it's a big position of debate because you have Lance Moore, you have Corey Fuller, you have T.J. Jones and Ryan Broyles, and even Andrew Peacock to some extent at least. Is this situation anywhere near as dire as the backup quarterback? Is it did Detroit, are they really banking on some unseen development to kind of bolster the receiving core this coming season?
You know what? I think they are in some ways, but you've got Golden Tate and you've got Calvin Johnson. Those are 2 of the 15 best wide receivers in the league when they're both healthy, and we're going to have that this year. And I think you're going to see the vast majority of targets of those guys. You're looking at the third receiver, with the way that Eric Ebron is going to get used this year, and I do think we're going to see a lot of him kind of in that flexed role in a 2 tight end set where he's going to be, maybe tight, maybe he's flexed out, maybe he's playing wide out. I don't think you're going to see the third receiver get more than maybe 35% of the snaps this year. Yeah. It's not a high volume position. It's going to be, it could be specialized. You could have Fuller come in as the field stretcher. You could have Broyles come in as an underneath possession type guy. You can have Lance Moore come in the red zone, which is where he's really made his bread and butter in his career. And also, I have a feeling you're going to see that be a camp fight between Broyles and Moore to get that second inside receiver type role. And I think Fuller's going to hold on to that third outside role. And I really don't think you're going to see any other players really factor in. As good as Andrew Peacock will look catching balls from Kellen Moore on the side field in training camp next week, I just don't see how a guy with his size that doesn't play special teams can factor in.
Well, and I guess I have to ask you this question because, well, this might be the last time you and I ever speak about Ryan Broyles together. So, I just want to take a moment and, kind of savor it for a second. So Ryan Broyles had 35 snaps last year. It's the over-under for this year. What are you picking?
I'm going to go under. I'm actually of the belief I'm not sure he's going to make this team.
Oh, okay, fair enough. I'm kind of in the same boat. So,
well, and one name as we were going through those receivers, there is one you barely mentioned is Jeremy Ross, and as far as his main duty last year was kick returning, and is that something you think is his again this year to lose, or does it need to be someone else other than Jeremy Ross, who, at least in my opinion, just continues to get worse with those return duties?
Oh God, please let it be somebody else.
Yeah,
it's bad.
But are you hearing anything about it being someone else? Because I haven't, and every time I still look at the depth chart, it's Jeremy Ross at returning, and it's like, why? I don't get why the man is still there.
Yeah, I haven't either, and a couple of the coaches that I've talked to, and it's been a couple of weeks, other than one defensive coach that I spoke to earlier this week, they're not really all that concerned about it, or at least not saying so publicly. And that leads me to believe that they're either trying to pump up his confidence because at one time he was actually pretty good at that job, or they're just sort of laying in the weeds and going to claim somebody that gets cut from another team, or maybe one of the rookies will step up and take it, or some camp phenom will. Maybe Corey Fuller will figure out how to catch the ball when it's that high up in the air and be able to run with it. He hasn't been able to do that in the past, but man, if he could be a pretty good return man. Golden Tate's very good at it, but he's too valuable for the offense. T.J. Jones is a guy that I think should get a really good shot at that because I think that's his only shot of making the team on the active roster anyway. So I would love to see them open this up for competition. I would love to see them bring somebody in just to try. Maybe Stanford can do that. He's done it in the past. He did it in college. I don't know how successful he was off the top of my head, but anybody Ross. I mean, yeah, he's better than Stephon Logan, but where's that bar set? I mean, come on, an ant can't limbo under that. You gotta do better than that.
Jeff, we bring you on this show with the expectation that you can give us R.J. Stanford's college return records, and you can't provide that for us?
Sorry, bro.
Well, I guess, and actually you kind of talked about T.J. Jones, and it seems like you insinuated that maybe he could make it as a practice squatter. Do you think that if they designated him for the practice squad, he'd get there?
Yeah, I do. There's guys every year who the fans always think, oh, somebody will claim him, and every year those guys always wind up making it to the practice squad. There's only, I think I read the statistic where there was like 7, of that first cut claims of guys, from when they dropped down from 75 to 53, there was only like 7 guys who got claimed and actually changed teams last year. And it's a similar number just about every year. They really do let these people go, and a lot of it is as a service to the agents, because the agents at that point are like, okay, let's get him on this practice squad. He knows this system. If somebody gets hurt, he's moving up. The agents put a lot of pressure on the teams not to let those guys go. I think we saw it last year with Mr. Copeland, who everybody was like, "Oh my God, he's got he's the Osprey. Somebody's going to claim him." Well, he made it back. He eventually did wind up getting claimed, and there's a chance that he could be put out there again, and the Lions could claim him back. You never know. It's just, I do think you're going to see that. I really don't think any of the Lions guys would get poached this year. Really don't.
Jeff, just shifting gears, Brandon, I want to look at the defensive line if we could.
Fine. Okay. Do whatever you want, Nick.
I appreciate your approval. The defensive tackle position in particular, when I say the names Nada, Tyron Walker, Karan Reed, Gabe Wright, what do you think about the strength of the defensive tackle position as it relates to where it was last year and obviously one of the most dominant in the league? And just what do you think it can be this year with such drastic turnover?
I think they're going to be different. You can't model the defense the same way you did around Ndamukong Suh because he's a unique player. Haloti Ngata is a very good player, but he's a different kind of player. And if they ask him to do what Suh did, or they ask Karan Reed to do what Ndamukong Suh did, it's not going to work. I trust that Terrell Austin is smarter than that. And I know that Chris Kasurik and the rest of the defensive staff are telling him that. This is a bright coaching staff, and they're gonna make adjustments. They're gonna tweak things. Tyron Walker's a pretty interesting guy. I got a chance to watch a couple of his games with the Saints. He's really explosive. He plays a lot like the way Nick Fairley did. He's a guy who gambles for the rush more and will sacrifice some of his run defense to try to get into the backfield. That can be really annoying as a fan, but it can also be glorious. And he absolutely planted quarterback. He killed Matt Ryan in their first game of the last year. He made a little move where he did a little stutter step with his inside foot, faked a spin, and then just went right inside and hit Matt Ryan untouched. And that's a special kind of move. He's a really explosive player. Now, he's got to do it in a lot more snaps than he has in the past, but there's a lot of potential there. This is a group with good potential. They're not going to be a dominant unit, but they can be a very good unit. I like everything I've heard about Karan Reed. I certainly love his mindset. He's a wonderful guy. I like what Gabe Wright offers to some extent. I think as a fourth defensive tackle, you could do worse than having a rookie like Gabe Wright in that role. So, I'm optimistic that it's going to work. I feel a lot better about it because the linebackers behind them, Levy, and you're going to get Stephen Tulloch back. They're really, really good, and that gives me some comfort that even if Nada is only 80% of what he used to be in his heyday, and Walker can only be good for 500 snaps instead of the 750, I think they'll be all right. I don't think you're going to see a lot of drop-off. I don't think they're going to get as many sacks, but I think the run defense will be pretty darn good still, and I think that the depth will be okay.
Well, and I actually I went back just for the heck of it because I wanted to get some Tyron Walker background just on how he played against the run. And I did notice some of that. There was one play that stuck out to me though that I guess I didn't realize how stout and strong he was because all you ever hear about is the fact that he is quick. I mean, he's still a big guy. I know he's not the biggest when it comes to defensive tackles, but there's a particular play week 7 when they played the Lions, the Saints. And on 2nd and 1, he stalemated and got low on Larry Warford. So if you can handle a power attack from Larry Warford, that gives me a little confidence. Granted, one play does not make 750 snaps, but it was just something that was nice to see actually on tape to kind of back up the things that we've been talking about here. You talked about the linebackers, and obviously they welcome back Tulloch. That's huge, especially in the run game. But how do you see the linebackers working, say, throughout a 10-play series? Do you see if they're going to run a 4-3, to start as their base defense, do you see Whitehead out there to start and then maybe mixing Van Noy in there on nickel and taking off Tulloch? How do you see that all kind of playing out, or at least in your wildest imagination?
What you just said would be my ideal mix. You've got Whitehead out there with Tulloch and Levy on first down, and then based on the playing situation, if it's a passing situation, I want Tulloch out of there and I want Van Noy in. And I would really like to have somebody better than Tahir Whitehead, who's not a bad player. And I slam him way too much because he's not nearly as bad as I make him out to be in my writings, and I apologize for that, Tahir. Sorry, bud. But yeah, they're going to be okay. And where I get into trouble is the depth, because I really don't see a lot of depth there beyond those 4. Maybe somebody will turn that around, but I'm still worried about Kyle Van Noy because what I saw last year was a guy. Yes, he was hurt. He was also thinking way too much, and that's a real problem when you're at that position. Paralysis by analysis when you're out on the field, really, really not good, and that needs to go away quickly. And that's something that I hope we can see in camp. in the next couple of weeks. That he's back to being instinctive and a little more proactive than delayed reactive. Because if he's like that, that's a wasted draft pick, as much as I hate to say it. But this is a very big year for him. He needs to step up because the Lions need that. They need that extra outside pass rusher because defensive tackle is probably the weakest, not the weakest, the thinnest position right at this point, and they've got to get something from the linebackers in the blitz. Tulloch was the only guy who was really good at it last year. He'll be back and doing it well, but if they could get another outside guy doing it like Van Noy, man, that would be wonderful.
And so, Jeff, just overall looking at training camp over the next month, what really is the most important thing that you want to see outside of the relative health of the team and everyone, making it through training camp injury-free? But what's the most important thing you're looking to see?
I want to see the offense have some flow because last year they didn't have any flow. Last year, especially in training camp, you could see that nobody was on the same page, and it wasn't any one person's fault. They were all just learning it. I want to see that this year they're into it. They've learned it. They know this is the back of their hand. They can run these plays. It's second nature to them. I really want to see that fluidity. I want to see an increased pace. I want to see better tempo. The Lions were really bad when they went slow last year, and for some reason they went slow a lot. I want to see that stop. I want to see them working on, running a 2-minute offense as their base offense sometimes just to catch people off guard. New Orleans did this wonderfully. Lombardi, for whatever reason, kind of abandoned that. I want to see a simplified blocking scheme. I don't want to see Brandon Pettigrew lined up onto the left of Riley Reif and having to block the guy around the right tackle on a run play. That's got to stop. That's the kind of stuff I want to see gone. I want to see an offense that looks like a talent. There is a lot of talent on this offense. I want to see them actually play to it, and that's what I want to see when I go to camp next week and the week after that.
Well, and I think maybe my point is either piggybacks off yours or it's a microcosm of. I'm not sure, but for me, I need to see or at least hear about the offensive line kind of gelling and finding itself, which is going to be tough. We don't know when Adrian Waddle is going to be back and fully healthy. I mean, last we knew, he said he's really trying to get there for week 1, so who knows? But we've seen Stafford play extremely well when he has time, and that's why I think – granted, maybe he has a problem and he does have some issues of his own, but give him a running game. I think he's in that same tier that we talked about with Mike Sando's article. I thought it was on point. He kind of is like the Eli Manning or the Joe Flacco, who actually might be, maybe that's not fair to Joe Flacco anymore, but he's that player that while he's not consistently great, he can be great or very good at enough times for you to win a championship. And if you look at the numbers for Joe Flacco last year when Gary Kubiak brought in his run-first offense, his completion percentage went up 3 points, and his quarterback rating went up. It skyrocketed almost 18 points. So if the offensive line can open up holes behind a new power scheme, kind of what you were talking about there, it's going to help everything else fall into place and give that offense the tempo it needs and give it the options it needs to do to open the field and open the playbook when the time is right. Not to mention, it'd be a pretty big PR boost for the front office. Trust us, we're remaking this offensive line on the fly. Now look what we've done with, we've had some investment before, we had just the right investment now, and it's all worked out.
Yeah, and on the defensive side of the ball, for me, it's how do these rookies kind of ingratiate themselves with the defense, and to a lesser extent, I include Kyle Van Noy in that. Is Quandre Diggs going to prove to be what we all hope and think he can be? Is Alex Carter already left for dead, or is he someone that can find a role in this defense as a rookie? Does Gabe Wright become a real part of the rotation on the defensive line? And is Kyle Van Noy a starter on this defense, or does he need that another year of development coming off an injury? So there's a lot of guys for a defense that I think has depth issues at multiple positions that could become key players right off the bat as rookies. How many of them actually do so?
Well, and folks, that about wraps up our training camp primer. We want to thank Jeff Risdon for coming back. Good to see you again and hear from you again, buddy. We're going to probably want to report from those camp visits you make. So now we can find you at Real GM, and I thought there was one more site, and it's escaping me right now.
Yeah, I have shifted my draft stuff. Detroit Lions draft is on hiatus. I had some health issues that I had to get cleared up. I just didn't have time to devote to it. and a couple of my writers parted for greener pastures. So now my draft writing is primarily at draftbreakdown.com, which all you people should know from watching their videos. You'll find my stuff there. I actually did my first piece there yesterday, breaking down Robert Nkemdiche, who's a potential future Lion defensive tackle. You want to check that out, and you'll also be able to find my Lions musings on the blog at 96.1 ESPN Grand Rapids here before too long, too.
Well, right on, and the Twitter handle is at Jeff Risdon. Folks, if you have anything you'd like to add about training camp or what you want to see, especially in this next month, to make you feel good about going into the season and getting into September and the games, you can find the show on Facebook, Lions Central Radio. You can find the show on Twitter, Lions Central PFC. You can find me personally at Brandon Alisoglu. That's ALISOGLU. And Nick Kostora, of course, at Nick Kostora, KOSTORA.
All right, folks, we're starting to talk real football. It's getting pretty exciting around these parts. Until next week, for Brandon Alisoglu, I am Nick Kostora. Thank you so much for tuning in to Lions Central Radio.